Elevating the human experience.
One podcast at a time. I am Emmanuel.
And I'm Lola, and this
is the LHC Pod.
Welcome.
How are you doing today?
Doing very good. And you?
Man, fantastic.
What's going on?
Man, nothing much. We've been there.
Did anything happen in your hood this time?
Hood. A whole lot of things happen every time in the hood. It depends on what you want to see, what you want to hear, you know?
Yeah. But I think talking about things that we want to hear, there's been a lot of buzz on the social spaces lately, talking about parenting, talking about, our relationships with our parents. Some people say, oh, we've been traumatized. And some other people are like, oh, well, this is something that they had to do. They had to make sacrifices for us and all that. So do you think we can talk about that today?
Why not?
Okay.
Why not? Talking about parenting, sometimes it's a very dicey conversation. And if you have been following trends over a period of time, you'd realize that people are beginning to question our parents in how they have nurtured us to growth and all of that. And you have a multitude, would I say a multitude, or you have different conversations. So It's been one age, Gen Z versus the millennial versus the baby boomers and stuff like that.
Intergenerational issues.
And everybody is speaking up. While I encourage this kind of conversation, sometimes I tell people that they need to be careful as to what they say out there, because sometimes you just might be misleading some persons, and parenting is something that is very, very dicey and also crucial to human existence.
Well, talking about, being very sensitive about this, or talking about it being a sensitive topic, from my own side, I would say that between me and my friends, we talk a lot about it, and we always say things like, oh, there's a lot of stuff that our parents did based on the limited knowledge that they had. Of course, no one wants to admit that these things had an impact as at the time they were done, but later you just discover that, oh, we had all these things going on. And there was a lot of fallback from it. So yes, we know that they made a lot of sacrifices. We know that there were so many things that they denied themselves just to ensure that we get to the stage that we are today. But do you think that in doing that, they omitted certain important aspects of emotional well-being? Those kinds that make people say, oh, right now we're going through a lot of trauma and there's a lot of stress on the part of people based on the fact that this is how our parents raised us. Would you say so to begin with?
Yes, I think that someone once made a tweet on the X app speaking to how he cannot fault, you would see the tweet on the screen, how he cannot fault his parents, and also cautioning those who are beginning to speak up as a result of the traumatized experience that they've had with their parents. Going to your question, I think that I would always look at it from the cultural perspective. Okay. So first of all, as Africans, we live a communal life. It is one for all, all for one. And there is a popular adage or proverb that says that it takes an entire community to raise a child.
Absolutely.
Right? So it means that the philosophy behind that is that everybody has a role to play in ensuring that the child is well, not just taken care of. Morally is also right. For instance, if a child is doing something very wrong, the tendency that people can easily reprimand whether the parents or not is highly there, and they can correct. And sometimes you see them using
those and then I think to your point,
they're using the cane and all of that. But if you look at it, you realize that we're coming from a society or a culture where morals are high, and for that, the child, you, as a child, you're usually not spared the rod. So whether it
But you
is
see this.
excessive, that then becomes another question, or something that we need to look at.
So yeah, I think in recent generations we've moved from the phase of rough parenting, so-called rough parenting, to the more gentle style of parenting. So speaking to what you just said, about the whole discipline thing and all that, corporal punishment in previous generations was seen as something necessary, something important for character development. But now it's seen as, cruelty, it's seen as abuse, because a lot of times you find out that these things have been misused. So this generation is shifting from the style of parenting that says, okay, you don't have to be there emotionally for your child, but you do need to provide for them. You need to give them shelter, clothing, education, and all that. But now the emphasis is not just on providing for your child, but also on giving them emotional support. A lot of people in our time, and of course I speak to the generations, people over 30, 25, a lot of people in our time didn't experience that kind of emotional support that is necessarily deemed as part of parenting
Yeah.
now. So I think,
Yeah. So,
yeah.
talking about the African parenting style, you realize that first of all, um, when you want to compare with the foreign style,
Okay.
you'll see that for the foreign, what I mean by foreign
Foreign.
is maybe
You
the
mean
Western,
Western?
the
Yeah.
Western world.
Okay.
You realize that their own style is entirely different, which is it is permissive. Okay,
Right.
it is
The so-called
permissive.
gentle
Yeah,
parenting.
gentle
Yes.
parenting. It is
Yes.
permissive. In
Yeah.
Asia, it is authoritarian.
Ah,
Okay,
right. The
in
tiger
Africa,
moms.
in
Yes.
Africa, it is also authoritarian. Okay, so when you take another step again, which is in the Western world,
Okay.
it is more of individualistic parenting style. In Asia, I think that in Asia it is collective. In Africa, it is also collective,
Collective.
right? So yes, and because we are we're a society that is morally conscious, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
find out that parents are usually very hard on their children.
But why do you think that is the case though? I mean, why
They are
is that
hard
hardness
because
necessary?
yeah,
Yeah.
they are hard because first of all, it is how they have been trained.
Okay.
Okay, so it's like you are handing a skill set
Yes.
or a training from generation to
To
generation.
generation. Okay.
And because of the level of exposure, as it were, because sometimes you have persons from the rural
Yeah.
communities who are not as exposed, who are not educated, who cannot even tell what their emotional being
Yeah.
are,
Yeah. Yeah.
who are very much stressed, right? Up to the point that sometimes they just want to take their how will I call it now? Want to take they just want to pour out themselves on the
Okay.
kids, and they are
There is
unable to
that. Yeah. There is that.
really control themselves. You would also agree with me that there is financial burden and all of
Burdens.
that,
Yeah.
and they are unable, so they are thinking of what to eat,
Okay.
entirely stressed out,
Okay.
and this can be a factor
Okay.
that warrants all of these things that you see
That we see. Okay.
today
Okay.
being transferred to their kids. Yes.
People have been tweeting that the way they were raised by their parents is abusive. Now, abuse is a very strong word, but if let's analyze it in line of the sacrifices that parents have made. African
But if
parents
there
have
is
made.
abuse, there is abuse.
Okay,
It
so what
doesn't
is
necessarily
abuse?
mean
What constitutes parental abuse?
yeah,
in
it
this
doesn't
context?
necessarily. You can be abused knowingly and unknowingly.
How would you be abused unknowingly?
Unknowingly, meaning that your parents do not even know what it is that they are actually doing. They don't
Um,
consider it abuse.
hold
But
up,
on
hold
the
up.
other, hold on. On the other hand, it
Mm-hmm.
can be based on law, based on the rules that governs the society. An abuse can
So,
be an abuse, whether you call it moral training or not. It's an abuse. It
okay,
doesn't stop it from being what it is, whether it is
okay.
coming from your parents or not.
So my understanding of abuse is obviously it's maltreatment of someone. It's like doing or conducting yourself towards someone else, especially in this case, a minor, like the people who are you're raising, conducting yourself in a way that is inappropriate and unacceptable. Abuse can take so many forms. Abuse can be financial, emotional, and so on and so forth. So if you look at some of these tweets that I'm referencing, you'd find out that a lot of this is based on the fact that these people feel they were neglected emotionally. Yes, the parents provided for them physically, they denied themselves so that they could get an education. For example, they went without all those creature comforts that they would have had just to ensure that their children got the best in life,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But
yeah.
getting the best in life, how do you think it adds up when the same people are coming back to say, oh, you did made all these sacrifices and yet you did not look after me emotionally, so I still feel traumatized?
Okay, I'm going to give an
That is the
instance.
issue.
Hold on. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to give an instance. In a situation, and then you confirm this if it is an abuse or not. You go
Okay.
out, you have an altercation with your pair,
Yeah.
and sometimes you are beaten,
Yeah.
or you are not the aggressive type. You do not want to engage in physical combat and all of that. Your parents get wind of that incident, and then you come back home and they lock you up and beat the hell out of you and say, "Why didn't you fight back?" and stuff like that. How would you how would you classify that kind of treatment?
Okay.
Does it warrant that? Is it excessive?
Exactly. Is it really necessary?
Is it
That's how I would,
necessary? So for
yes.
me, I would
I would
see
say
that
it's not,
instance
yeah.
as an abuse. Why? Because
Yeah,
you think,
definitely.
though you are instilling discipline, are you supposed to even instill the discipline of being able to engage in physical combat?
But what is not is
or
discipline?
or you should either look at the situation and say, okay, you did very well by not engaging in fighting, or probably just ignore. But why is it that kind of scenario, how would you classify it?
So I think the first thing is everything has to be taken contextually, and there are some instances where reaction, especially in this case, reaction is much more than the action itself.
Okay.
And in most cases, you find out that if that happens, there is this overcompensation that occurs. Maybe, the parent goes overboard and does something, and or the child rebels in some way against what the parent has done in reaction to what they did. So let me come back to your example with another contextual example. So for example, the child goes and they discover that, oh, this child is fond of stealing sweets from the shop, and it's a recurrent behavior. It's not something that happens one off and all that, and the parent has been trying to correct it. First they used corporal punishment, tried with the cane and all that. It's not working. You're trying to talk to the child and it's not working. You find out that psychologists will tell you there's an age appropriate way to discipline children,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But either way, psychologists do not tell you that any of those age appropriate methods involves physical punishment. In the past, this parenting age that we're talking about, that we're referencing, that people are talking about, you find out that parents resorted more to the physical approach of things. Oh, let me take the cane, I would flog the spirit of theft out of this child, or I'll flog that spirit of
And in
rebellion
that
out. It
case,
was
you have
always physical.
scars. So you have
Yes, it is
scars
scars,
that.
but was the problem really addressed? Is what I'm saying. The problem wasn't addressed.
Okay. Yeah.
Because these same people have grown up and are now telling you that you guys traumatized
So
us.
that is that an abuse?
Okay.
Going back
Going
to
by
your,
that
yeah,
definition,
yeah. So
yes,
is
it
that
is
an
abuse.
abuse?
Going by that definition, yes.
So that
is
it
abuse.
could be both physical and emotional abuse.
Yes.
And it is right for people, some of the kids who today are now grown up to say, you know what? It is good that we start talking about this, and people begin to realize that parenting is all about using force,
Yeah.
even blackmailing.
Oh yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
again, your uncle comes around, it gives you, say, 2,000 shillings.
Shillings. Whoa. How far
One
back are you going though?
1,000
Shillings. Whoever.
so I'm just making an
Yes,
example, or
yes, yes.
you're giving 1,000 Ghana cedis, right?
Wow.
Or 5,000 naira, right? And your parents says, what? Bring the money, let me help you to keep it, let me save it for you. And at the end of the
Scam of the
day,
century.
and at the end of the
Nobody
day, when
ever
you go back
saw
to say
that.
you want to collect this money, the money never comes
That was
to
financial
you.
abuse,
And
man.
then they are
Nobody ever
definitely,
saw that money. Did you see
you
the
know,
money?
they are going to come back to you and tell you, oh,
I invested this in your education.
no, he said, I backed you for 9 months,
Oh
for years.
yes.
I carried you for 9 months during pregnancy.
Guess
I've
the
always
gender.
paid your school fees and everything. But for me, I think that this kind of attitude, behavior, and all of that instills some level of distrust in the child, because I don't think that
Yeah.
yeah, you know, there's level of distrust. Because the
Oh,
child will no
absolutely.
longer trust the parents, and even
Absolutely.
till date,
The child will not even trust anybody.
most recently, I saw a tweet of a guy that says that the mom has agreed to purchase his AC,
Okay.
hair conditioner,
I saw that.
250,000 naira.
Yes.
The mom has made deposit of 50,000 naira, and she wants to carry the AC, and he wants. So what is that? Everybody
answer.
knows that
Short answer.
that guy is never going to get the
Short
balance.
answer, Otilo.
You understand? He's never going to get that money.
No.
This is the situation we found yourselves,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
people are living with that trauma, and they will continue to live with it throughout their lifetime. What I'm saying, in essence, is, has this, and I would like to ask you, Lola,
Yeah.
has this changed anything? Has it, this kind of training instilled the level of discipline we should have in our society? Has it?
I would not say it has. I don't think
Okay,
it
so
has.
yeah, tell us.
I don't think it has, and the reason why the reason why I don't think it has is because people are now focused on how bad the whole experience made them feel, and that doesn't necessarily encourage any sense of discipline. So what do we even call discipline? Discipline is motivated by self. To be very honest, discipline is taught at a young age as a set of habits.
Yeah.
But when one gets older, one has the choice to decide whether to keep those habits or create new ones. And the issue here is the time that is supposed to be spent, changing those things and updating or whatever needs to be done. You find out that they are actually spending that time recovering from the trauma of being brought up. So what I'm saying is, instilling discipline is possible, but with the right kind of parenting. So people will say, oh, there's no formula to this thing, spare the rod. See, spare the rod and spoil the child is not even something to be taken literally. It simply means you have to tell them the directions in which they need to go. They are not saying, oh, take something and, start whipping children or stuff like that. So I think that's where I would stand on that particular topic.
Sometimes people are saying that, oh, you don't need to talk to your talk back at your parents when they are making
talk back.
when they are
Did you say
when they are
talk back?
correcting
Yeah.
you and all of that. I'd like to ask
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
would correcting your parents as a child, would correcting your parent mean, will it change the tide of things? Are there likely going to be improvements?
Emmanuel, I need to interrupt you right there. Did you say talk back to your parents? Hello,
I mean,
you're in
correct.
Africa.
Yeah, I mean,
Correct
to
your
be,
parents.
yeah, you should be
That
able
is-
to, because
that
that
is-
is the only way. That is the only way I think that they would begin to understand that certain
See.
things. I know that is a very dicey situation, but
dicey. It's not
how do children correct these anomaly in our society.
Okay, you see the way you're even saying it. I see the way I'm reacting to you. This is the general societal perception. You cannot correct your parents or
Why?
or talk back at
Why?
for two main reasons. And
Why?
okay, so let me start from the societal reason, then I
Okay.
can touch on the psychological reason. So societally, you will say, oh, these guys, they saw life before you, they gave you life. What correction could you possibly be giving them? What? That's one. Wait, hold the thoughts. Hold the thoughts. The second one is psychological. From a psychological standpoint, correction simply means that you've seen an error and you're trying to, right it. You're trying to make sure that it's not repeated and all that. How do you do that while still maintaining the parent-child dynamic? You see where I'm going with this? So it's not really cut and dried. Yes, you might say, oh, the solution is for the child to tell the parent. But you see, first of all, children don't give parents feedback. First of all. Now, I'm not saying that in the sense that it is wrong to do so. And I know where you're coming from. You're saying you can.
I'm saying that children should begin to be able to stand and say, I know in African context you cannot
you
should
can't.
not
I mean,
be
are you
seen,
going to walk up to your dad?
you
Okay,
should not be seen
will
to
you
be
walk to your
correcting
dad?
your parents.
Okay, you
but you
tell
also
your dad
earlier on in this conversation,
Yes.
earlier on in this conversation,
Yes.
you also noted that certain things that parents do are not right.
Yes, but I'm also
Right?
telling you that
So
contextually, how do you correct those things?
Yes, how do we then begin to change that narrative and just so that they realize that certain things that they are doing are not.
I have a short answer to that question. Very short answer.
Okay,
to that question.
I'd like to hear from you.
Okay, parents need to hear from their own peers, and who are those? Therapists. People who have
Not everybody can go to a therapist.
No, so the thing is this, it's not like one-on-one therapy sessions. These can be conversations that are ongoing, and let me tell you what I mean. There are many spaces that these conversations can take place. For example, the schools where children go, places where you have parent forums, these kinds of things. You can easily just go and say, oh, this is the message, because it's not going to be, I can assure you, the typical standard African parent is not going to take it well when it comes directly from the child.
It doesn't
no matter how well intentioned.
Nobody. See, the truth is no, Lola.
If you are a father, how would you like it if your son or daughter came up to you? Okay.
I would listen.
You're an outlier.
Because
let's say,
first of all, I would listen. Why? Because
yes,
I know how many times I'd had to stand up for what I want to do.
But that is you. So guess what?
You understand? So I'd had to stand up and say, you know what? On this,
yes,
this is my position, and I am going to do it. And I tell them I tell my parents that whatever the consequences are, I take it.
Well.
So again, we need to get to that point where young adults, teenagers, and children have the free will to be able to express themselves. Okay? Because you say that, they should not, correct their parents on certain things and all of that, and they have to live with the trauma in their lifetime,
in their own lifetimes,
right? So we cannot say because we're Africans we should not begin to change.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that because we're Africans.
That is one. Secondly, we have seen children who have issues, even issues as severe as rape, but they can't even by family members, and they can't even approach their parents. And situations where they have approached their parents, they were either reprimanded or asked to keep short. And things go on and on like that. So I think that for me, there needs to be a way, a subtle way. Maybe
I think we both agree on that.
Yeah, a subtle way. A subtle way can be we do not need to wait for therapists to begin to have discussions and engagement.
Why this starting point?
Yeah,
it is.
Why this conversation is ongoing and all of
it's
that.
A starting point. Yes.
For the children, they can have interactions. Maybe not in the immediate when some stuff like this happen, but they can later come back and like, okay, Dad, we had this conversation before. I know that this is your position, But
Okay.
can we look at it from this other side? So maybe when there is a back and forth, more back and forth interactions between parents and their children,
Yeah.
the parents will now begin to have a more polished understanding on the thinking process of their children, and then maybe they would subside, they would reduce sometimes their level of influence in
Yeah.
terms of how they micromanage their children
Yeah.
in certain sense. Yeah.
Okay. So, okay. Now, I think we're sort of aligned in that respect, where definitely these conversations have to happen, and these conversations have to be done, and they cannot be done in a confrontational or straightforward way. We agree on that
Yeah.
part. So, fine. Now we know that as a society, we need to consciously steer ourselves towards these conversations. What can parents do in the meantime to sort of right the wrongs that have been done in the past by some of these actions? Because now we have a lot of people around who are like, oh, there was so much abuse,
Okay.
and there was so much trauma,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
everything.
yeah.
So going forward, how do we progress this conversation from this point onwards, in your view?
Yeah, I think that it's good that this conversation is coming up. We need to keep at it.
Yes, we do. We sure do.
Yes, we need to keep at it.
We sure do.
And we're using this medium to appeal to parents
Yeah.
to always listen to their child. I know you gave birth to them.
Yep.
You trained, you raised them. You
Yeah.
want them to be the best in life.
Yep.
But there are certain unintended consequences when we are too domineering and too authoritarian in the way we do our things,
And to focus on physical provision,
and
rather
too
than emotional support. Yeah.
right? So parents need to put this into consideration,
Yeah.
and be less aggressive in certain ways, right? So not to be too subtle, but again, less aggression, and have a more interactive relationship with your
With
children.
the children,
And
yeah.
it's not like a God servant relationship where once the parents are coming in, the kids are running.
Parents'
helter-skelter
word
and
is
everything.
law, and nobody dares to disobey.
And
Yes.
with this, I think we might just begin to see certain changes. Children more outspoken and taking a stand, and we might just be having a better society for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need children who can confidently say what they feel in the safe space that parents provide, and
Yeah.
not kids who are afraid to even speak up and say things that affect them directly, or rather look at the wrong sources or things like that.
And even going to peers
Yes,
for advice. And these advices
where they have
sometimes can
parents.
be
Yes.
wrong advice.
Exactly.
And it can naturally affect them at the end of the day.
Exactly.
I think this is a great conversation,
Absolutely.
a robust one. I want to thank you for bringing this up. And what do you
Yes,
think?
thank me.
Listeners and watchers out there, what is your opinion? Would you like the current or existing parenting style within the African context to continue, or would you want a shift a little bit into
Paradigm
what is
shifts,
expected?
to use
What
the cliche.
is that?
Paradigm shift.
Yes.
To use the cliche.
Yes. Let's have your comment in the comment section and continue the conversation right there.
Yes, please.
We appreciate your watching. Do subscribe to our channel, and be a part of our next episode.